Sibyrtios disappears from history after 303 BCE. One of the many Greek officers who served under Alexander and his successors, Sibyrtios has the distinction of exercising power in Macedonian lands in an independent capacity for a longer period of time than any of his better-known fellow Greeks. Sibyrtios hailed from somewhere on the island of Crete, and almost certainly came from an elite family. The circumstances of his entry into Macedonian service are unknown, but quite possibly similar to those of his fellow Cretan Nearchus, whose family moved to the Chersonese and developed a bond with Philip II. While we don't know the details of Sibyrtius' service record under Alexander, he was clearly present for the campaigns in the eastern satrapies. In 326, before marching through the Gedrosian desert, Alexander appointed Sibyrtius to the satrapy of Carmania. Shortly thereafter, his colleague Thoas, in charge of Arachosia and Gedrosia, to the south and east of Carmania respectively, died suddenly, and Sibyrtius replaced him in that office. When Alexander died in 323, Perdiccas confirmed Sibyrtius in his satrapy. During the settlement of Triparadisus in 321, Sibyrtius was reconfirmed in his station by Antipater and his allies. As a non-Macedonian, Sibyrtius seems to have kept a relatively low profile in order to not inspire the ire and jealousy of his xenophobic colleagues and neighbors. Aiding Sibyrtius' extended tenure was the general lack of interest in the eastern satrapies among the major successors, all of whom wanted to be closer to the center of action and power. Since Arachosia is located just to the south of Bactria, Sibyrtius was probably present when Peithon intercepted the Greek mercenaries who were attempting to leave Bactria and return to the Mediterranean during the regency of Perdiccas. Aside from this incident, we have little basis from which to hazard a guess about Sibyrtius' activities until 318 or so. In 318, Peithon, who had a kind of general authority over the east, attempted to increase his control at the expense of the eastern satraps. Joining with the wealthy satrap of Persis, Peucestus, and Eudamos, who had just fled from his post along the Indus with 120 war elephants, Sibyrtius contributed to the coalition that inflicted a battlefield defeat on Peithon. While both sides in this conflict were weighing their options, Eumenes fled east pursued by Antigonus the One-Eyed, the general of Asia, who, in the wake of Antipater's death, was now the greatest power in the empire. Ultimately, the eastern satraps and Eumenes joined forces against an alliance of Antigonus, Peithon, and Seleucus. The arrival of Eumenes threw off the balance of power in the eastern army. Prior to this, Peucestus, a former bodyguard of Alexander, was the clear leader of the army, having an edge in both prestige and wealth over his colleagues. The clever Greek Eumenes, however, had a formal commission from the would-be regent Polyperchon, and he was able to foil the ambition of Peucestus to command by resorting to the ruse of having Alexander's ghost preside over the war council, and to then present his advice as having been given to him by Alexander in a dream. In 317, before the two newly formed allied armies had clashed, Peucestus made a move to gain the edge and prestige over Eumenes by holding a grand banquet for the entire army. We do not know whether Sibyrtius was more sympathetic to Eumenes or Peucestus. However, whatever his views may have been, he was about to be sacrificed as a political pawn. To regain control, Eumenes forged a letter from the Persian satrap of Armenia, Orontes, claiming that Olympias and Polyperchon had won a total victory in Macedon, thus enthroning young Alexander IV and allowing Polyperchon to invade Antigonus's core territories in Asia Minor. Now viewing Eumenes as a major player in a new political order whose advent was imminent, everyone began to brown-nose Eumenes. To further strengthen his hand and create a financial bond with his better-off colleagues, Eumenes publicly charged Sibyrtius with secretly aiding Antigonus. While it is not impossible that Sibyrtius was in contact with Antigonus, there is no reason to believe in the veracity of any of Eumenes' accusations. The new hatred and resentment of Sibyrtius was severe enough that he was only able to save his life by fleeing the allied camp at night and returning to Arachosia. Eumenes was able to use his fear of treason to guilt the other satraps into loaning him money as a sign of their friendship. Forcing out Sibyrtios was a small price to pay, and it was politically expedient. Sibyrtios was not providing much in the way of troops or money, so his contributions were ones that Eumenes' army could do without if need be. Further, Sibyrtios was no more Macedonian than Eumenes, so Eumenes could attack him without fear of major backlash from the Macedonian rank and file, or from officers who felt that their perquisites as Macedonians were being threatened. Accordingly, Sibyrtios was not present at the battles of Peithon in 317 or Gabiene in 316. While we don't know Sibyrtios' intentions prior to being ousted from camp, it is apparent that he had allied himself with Antigonus before Gabiene. At the battle's conclusion, Antigonus found himself in possession of the Silver Shield's 3,000 troublesome old veterans. To dispose of this unit, which he hated passionately, Antigonus sent them to Arachosia and sent secret instructions to Sibyrtios to eliminate them in small batches by sending them on dangerous assignments. This last detail implies that with the fall of Eudamus' satrapy a few years before, Sibyrtios was now on the frontier, and that he may have faced some challenges from Chandragupta Maurya or other more local challenges. Sibyrtios is next attested in 303 BCE, still governing Arachosia, and now hosting the historian and Seleucid ambassador Megasthenes, who was returning from India. While we lack enough details of either the Babylonian War or Seleucus' eastern campaigns to be certain, it would appear that either Sibyrtios joined Seleucus during his revolt against Antigonus, or that he broke away from Antigonus at another point in time and then pledged his allegiance to Seleucus when he campaigned in the east around 307. Either way, Sibyrtios proved to be a consummate survivalist, holding power in a desolate satrapy with few soldiers and very few friendly settlers. He was able to survive raids, frontier skirmishes, and the politics of Macedonian succession on the fringes of the empire, despite not himself being a Macedonian. While Eumenes and Nearchus were more famous Greek followers of Alexander, Sibyrtios was the most successful Greek successor, and he helped to mold and Hellenize the East to the point where the Greco-Bactrian kingdom could emerge and endure for centuries.